Do you know how to answer questions related to charts, figures, and tables? If you're like many students, you think, oh, that's easy. I can easily read a table or a diagram or a figure. Not a problem. However, you've got to be more careful than that. So today, we're going to teach you how to answer related questions to charts, tables, figures, and diagrams on the ELA SHSAT reading exam. Every chart, every table, every diagram has a main idea. Much like every paragraph has its own idea, a chart has its own idea. It's supporting some idea in the passage in most cases. Your objective is to figure out what is that main idea of that chart, of that table, of that figure. Now, be careful. It is not often as easy as you think it is. Sometimes you get lucky, and it is. But in truth, you have to answer the question, what is the chart not telling me? That's a good rule of thumb to think about every time you look at a chart and a table. In many cases, students will think an answer relates to the chart, but the chart isn't actually about the topic mentioned in the answer choice. So you've got to be careful of that. Let's take a look at a few examples. 57. The table after paragraph 7 expands upon a central idea in the excerpt because it shows that, okay, let's go back up to the table. So this was Impressions of an Indian Childhood, and it was about a young woman who is learning to do beadwork and learn various related skills. So this table shows a brief history of beadwork in South Dakota. Make sure you read the titles, any notes for any tables or figures, and if it's a graph, any chart labels or legends. Okay? So in this case, everything is noted as dates in one column, and the actual events. The events relate to using beads. Dakota began trading the beads in the 1600s. In the 1830s, they began using glass beads. And then they were expelled from their homeland, and later they still create items to sell outside of their community, even as recently as the 1900s. So the main idea here is how beads were integral to this society or culture from the 1500s all the way up to 1900, so a period of 400 years. This skill was important to the Indian culture. Let's see what answer choice matches that idea. It's A. The craft that the author was learning was a tradition that endured through many generations and changes. The table showed hundreds of years, which would span many generations, and even changes, certain wars and movements and things like that. So A is going to be the correct answer. It does indicate the right idea for the table. Note the table does not say anything about the family incorporating traditional materials as a way of resisting European traders. It does not say anything in the table about their cultural tradition being recognized in Europe. It does not say anything about the author incorporating color into her craft work. These are ideas that are simply not in the table. One good approach is to always ask yourself, what does this table not tell me? That will help you eliminate or not get confused by certain answers that might otherwise seem somewhat compelling. Let's see another example. So in this passage, we have a chart. The diagram is about the environmental impacts of persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals in electronic devices. And then it has some footnotes at the bottom. You definitely want to read that. Electronics such as smartphones, computers, cameras, and large appliances contain toxins like lead, chromium, zinc, nickel, mercury, beryllium, and cadmium. These substances are bioaccumulative, which means that they accumulate over time in living organisms. So what is the idea of this particular chart? Well, it could be that an unlined landfill leaks, but that doesn't seem to be it. That's really a small part of the chart. What do we see? I see arrows going everywhere, all over the place. That seems to be telling me that the toxins from a landfill are going everywhere into the air, which gets into the clouds and into the rain, which comes down onto the trees and the people. It goes into the groundwater underneath. It gets into the surface water. It runs off back into the surface water. There are arrows everywhere, which indicates these bioaccumulative toxins that you can never get rid of, these forever chemicals, are getting everywhere. It's not just one place. which is a problem. Let's see what the correct answer to the question is. How does the diagram after paragraph 9 most support the claim in paragraph 4? The diagram emphasizes that toxic chemicals in e-waste can easily spread from landfills. That was the main idea. There are arrows going everywhere from outside the landfill, to the air, to the ground, to under the water, to the actual surface water, everywhere. That was the right idea. What do the other answer choices say? The diagram suggests that people send large amounts of recyclable e-waste to landfills. No. The passage might, but the diagram says nothing about how much of the waste goes to landfills. That simply was not in the picture. C. The diagram implies that most landfills are poorly designed to accommodate e-waste. No, it does show the actual toxins getting out of the landfill, but it says nothing about poor design. So ask yourself what this diagram does not show. It does not show anything about design. D, the diagram shows that water sources near landfills are endangered by e-waste. Well, it does show water sources that are somewhere near landfills are getting endangered by e-waste, but that's not the best or the most supportive answer. The best answer is that these chemicals are not only getting in the water, they're getting in the air, in the trees, in the ground, everything. So that would be a much better answer. Again, assess whatever that diagram shows. Think about what are the limits of what it is showing. What is it not telling you? It's not telling you about designs. It's not telling you about how much goes into there. Let's see another example. Here we have a graph of the telegraph messages transmitted over a 50-year period. What is it? It's telling us the number of messages transmitted in millions. And it gives the various decades, decade by decade. Okay, and it tells us the source of the data. It's from the US, so this must be messages sent in the US, from the US Census Bureau. So, and what's the main idea here? Well, it's clearly growing. In fact, it seems to be growing almost exponentially by the 1920s. So the growth in number of messages is increasing almost exponentially. Let's see the possible answer choices. 53. How does the graph support the ideas in paragraph 8? The correct answer is B. It provides evidence of the dramatic increase in the number of telegraph messages as Morse's system expanded across the United States. The scope was the United States. We saw that in the graph. We saw the graph. The y-axis was the number of messages sent in millions. So that number expanded given the bar charts, even exponentially. So that showed a dramatic increase. So B is the right answer. Let's check the other answers. What's wrong with them? A, it indicates how welcome the improvement of long-distance communication was. Wait, where does this graph say anything about being welcomed or not welcomed? That is an idea that's simply not in the chart. C, it reveals that by the 20th century, millions of people had used the telegraph. No, that's not what the data in the chart says. It says millions of messages were sent and millions more as it grows. But it said nothing about the number of people. That is not the data in the chart. D, it shows how improvements that allowed Morse code to be read in real time made relaying telegraph messages faster and increased the system's usage. No, the chart simply shows the increase in the number of messages sent over time. It does not say anything about why or how. So we cannot say anything about the improvements in the Morse code or faster relaying of messages as the reason for the expanding use of it. We just simply know the number of messages increased over time. So again, make sure you're careful of what the graph does not tell you. What is seemingly plausible, like there are millions of users. Well, that's not the data in the graph. Or they welcomed it, or there are improvements in the system. Those also seem plausible as explanations of the growth, but that's simply not in the graph. So make sure you identify the main idea of each graph, figure, and diagram, and then ask yourself what is not contained among the ideas in this particular diagram, figure, or table. And then you should be able to get yourself to the right answer without being tricked by potential wrong answers that might otherwise seem compelling.